today I'm really excited to have probably one of my favorite people in studio, is Stephen Benjamin from Anchor Capital. Stephen, thank you so much for coming and having a conversation with me today just about who you are, what you've done to get to where you are today. So thanks
for having me, Candice.
Awesome. So I want to go back a little bit. If you can tell me a little bit about your schooling career, we'll jump into university, and then you've been dabbled in a few career options that we'll talk through. But Tell me about high school and
Joburg born and bred. I grew up in kind of Morningside Sandton and went to Red Hill School. Red Hill was great. I'm still very friendly with the guys I met back in those days.
We audit Red Hill, actually.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. They make a bit of cash, I know, because my kids go there now.
Yeah.
So still very friendly with the guys that I met in my Red Hill days. In business with Matt, who's one of the founders of Anchor, who I met at Red Hill. I actually ended up going to Crawford for high school, which was a bit of a strange change. I was loving Red Hill, but my older brother had gone to Crawford, and it just seemed like a good change. So finished up at Crawford in Sandton.
Academically, how good were you at school?
Well, I probably didn't put everything that I should have into the academic side at Red Hill in high school. But I was fine. I was never kind of at risk of having a failure, but I wasn't a straight A student. I was always the guy that was kind of having a bit more fun, and I think of all the executives or the prefects at Crawford, I think I was probably the one that got there because of the relationships that I had in the school. But I love school. Crawford was fantastic in the end.
Did you play any sport?
Yeah, so I played a lot of football when I was younger.
I was quite surprised to hear that you were a footballer.
I was the captain of the Wanderers under 10 A side.
Okay.
I love football as a kid. Played sports throughout school.
Which team do you support?
I'm a very staunch Arsenal supporter.
Okay.
And we have a lot of banter in the office about that. So it hasn't been a good season second again, but I support Arsenal. So from school, went straight into Varsity. I actually went to Bond University, which isn't in SA anymore, but it's an Australian university that came out to SA. And I did my BCom there, which was great. The one thing I regret about that is that I didn't go to a big university like Wits or UCT. I kind of moved across the parking lot from Crawford High School into Bond. But that was fun, and finished my BCom and then did a postgraduate.
And during your university days, I hear you had a few business ventures that you set up.
Yeah, so we had a lot of fun in Varsity. We started throwing parties at nightclubs, and that culminated in the end in us actually having a share in a nightclub, which was the quickest way to lose a bit of money, but we had a lot of fun.
Who came up with the name Mint with a Y?
So Matthew will tell you that it was his initials, but that is actually not the case.
Yeah.
So we actually got into business with a guy who had opened a couple of nightclubs, and I think it was just one of the options on the things, but Matt seems to think it's his initials, but it wasn't. It was Mint. It was called Mint. It was lots of fun. We kicked off quite successfully there, but we had built up a bit of a following in Joburg. We had started off by throwing parties, and we had promo, we had girls selling shooters in clubs and that sort of thing. And
you managed that as well. So you had a promotion business alongside the night.
Yeah, it kind of progressed. So we started off with a promotions business, and it was a lot more fun throwing parties.
And managing people must have been hectic, okay?
Yeah, but it was fun. We learned a lot, managing people when there's not too much on the line is fun.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And it paid the bills.
It paid the bills. Was nice extra spending money. Then we took the plunge and opened a nightclub, which we were probably a bit too young to do. I think we were 21 or 22 when we did that. But it was lots of fun. We were interviewed on Highveld, and we had some cool kind of themes that we used to throw, and we got quite well known for that. But that game, if you're not kind of running it yourself and there every single day, then I think you kind of put yourself at risk of being kind of taken advantage of a little bit at that age. So, it was fun. I don't regret it at all. It taught us a lot of...
running a business understanding numbers, relationships are key to you, and we'll talk through that a lot in this discussion. So we could see coming from school where relationships was key to you, and I think just, who you are as a bubbly, vibrant person, a nightclub doesn't surprise me, and that's something that you got involved in.
Yeah.
So then after that obviously ended. You probably needed to take your career a little bit more seriously of what you wanted to do. So what happened next?
Yeah, so I think, I was kind of young, had very little experience had no experience in corporates. So the first thing you do is you ask your family and friends if they know anyone who can help you get a job.
Yeah.
With my dad being a doctor, he had a good relationship with a couple of the pharmaceutical companies, and he put a call through, and I started off as a medical rep. I remember my salary was 7,000 Rand a month. And they gave me a little car.
When was that? Which year was that?
That was in 2003.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was a medical rep, really tough job.
You got a car?
I got a car.
Was that the Honda Civic or not the Honda
No,
Civic?
so the Honda Civic was my first car that my dad bought me. And then I upgraded to a Golf 5 that had windy windows at the back. But that was cool.
Sound system of note, apparently.
Yes. Oh, that was in the Civic. Yeah, that was in the Civic. Yeah, I think the sound system was probably worth more than the car. But I think back, it's actually quite embarrassing how we used to drive around. But yeah, it's funny that you know that, Cans. Anyway, so so it started off as a medical rep. That would really, I think, is the start of learning how relationships impact your ability to sell, I suppose. Really tough job. You've got to go and see 7 doctors a day. Doctors don't want to see you. And it's hard. It's not tangible because you don't know exactly, you might get a doctor to prescribe the drug that you are promoting, but you don't know because that patient will go to a pharmacy somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So that was a bit frustrating for me because I like to know the direct results of what I'm doing.
You obviously lessons learned there is because you never take no for an answer. So I'm sure valuable lessons were learned in
and I think the valuable lesson there was that you had to sell to the receptionist because the receptionist was the gatekeeper. So, if you weren't polite to the receptionist and if you didn't butter them up a little bit, then you didn't get in to see the doctor. So I think that was the start of kind of the psychology around how people like to buy from people. But it's quite a frustrating role, but it stood me a good stead because that allowed me to jump straight into my next role, which was at Investec in the private bank. And the whole thing about Investec Private Bank is that they deal with clients that are professionals, and doctors are obviously a big part of their business. That's how they started the business there. So that allowed me to jump straight into being a private banker at Investec. And
you had the relationships already. Yes. From your previous experience.
Yeah, so that was the one part. And the second part that was important to Investec was that I was dealing at that level at quite a young age. So I managed to skip the admin role that most people start in at Investec. So that was good for me because I'm terrible at admin.
What did you enjoy most about that role at Investec?
Sure. I loved Investec. I think back, one of the things about Investec is that they make you feel like you're really important. So I remember kind of walking around the bank. When I left, I was managing a team of about 15 people there, what was called the hunting team, the acquisition team. And I remember walking around like I owned the place. So I loved Investec. It really, they're good at giving you that feeling of being super important and that kind of rah-rah mentality that goes around Investec was great. It's very hard to leave Investec. It's great there that they make it very hard to leave.
What was the catalyst for you to leave Investec?
I think the problem with the private bank at Investec is that it's very hard to go into something more specialized within the bank. Okay. There are a lot of people in private bank, and they're all looking to move up to the wealth department or the capital markets department. And if you don't have specific experience in that space, then you can get a little bit stuck. So I went from being what was called a hunter or client acquirer to then running that team. And then there was a bit of a ceiling there. So I started looking elsewhere.
Where was the next?
So the next step was probably the worst part of my career, which was Accenture. So it sounded great, going to this Chicago-based American business that employs thousands and thousands of people and does really cool stuff for big corporates. But being a management consultant is, I think, suited to a certain type of person, but definitely not to my type of personality.
I think very different, and I talk about culture a lot when I speak about the business that I'm involved in. And I think listening to the culture at Investec and just making you feel like you run the place, I think Accenture culture, in which I've heard, is very different.
It's the complete opposite. And what I often say to people who are leaving Investec or looking to leave Investec is that if you leave Investec and you don't go to a similar type of culture, you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
You might earn more, or you might have some flashy title. It sounded quite cool to be a management consultant.
Grass is not green on the other side.
Definitely not.
And then how long did that role last?
So not long. After 6 months, I just knew that it was just not for me. And I actually left Accenture without another job.
Okay.
I just knew that at that point, that was kind of soul destroying for me, and that I would find something else. And the kind of catalyst to finding something else is to just jump.
At this time, were you married?
I'm not sure if I was married. I was definitely with Jules, my wife. I'm not sure if we were married or engaged at that point, but she's always been very supportive of, like her husband or fiance leaving without a job. She was like, well, if it's not for you, it's not for you,
Rather be happy.
Yeah, and I think back to that point, if I'd stuck it out, I always say if you see a management consultant from Accenture, buy them a beer because they've got a tough life. So I was happy to leave,
And then before joining, Anchor, you dabbled in some gold sales. How did that happen?
Yeah, so that was a very interesting part of my career. So I worked for a gold trading business that was opening up a facility in Mozambique. So I was flying up and down to Mozambique every week to kind of build this thing out. I think that game, again, it wasn't playing to my strengths because my strengths is people and building and setting up a facility and doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Wasn't really to my strengths. I think why I was chosen for that role is we knew the family that owned the business, and I think when you're dealing with high value precious metals, obviously you want someone that you can trust. But it was okay. It wasn't my best, and it felt very unstructured. Not that I love structure actually, but just that was very unstructured. Flying into Mozambique into a little place called Chimoio where there's one.
You don't know if you're going to get taken or come home.
Yeah, when you got to do your job with a bit of security around you, then you're probably not in the right job.
Exactly. So when did the phone call come and the Anchor Capital journey begin? So
I'd always been very close to Anchor because Matt and I had been friends in school, and he was obviously one of the founders of Anchor. So I'd gone to a lot of their functions and very close to the business, and I phoned Matt and I said, look, this gold trading thing is not really suited to me, and I want to get back into financial services. That's where my strength is. I did well at Investec. I ran a good team there.
And how old were you then?
That was in 2018. So kind of 35-ish.
Yeah.
It's a daunting thought. You're 35. I had my daughter Hannah was at school, Red Hill, not cheap.
Yeah.
I had Emma, my other second daughter, was just born. So, it was quite a daunting thing to kind of start something new at that age. But it was the right thing for me in hindsight, and I'm very glad that I took that plunge.
I think I want to talk about that transition and just finding yourself in the Anchor Capital team. We've worked with you for probably 12 years now. It's been a long time, maybe even longer. Time flies when you're having fun. And I just think when I look at the culture of Anchor, and I think whenever I come home from an event that is an Anchor Capital event, I think, my husband knows I'm just beaming because the energy is so incredible. And I could just see you fitting into that incredible culture, and the relationships that are formed are key to you. So maybe tell me about your role starting at Anchor, and then we can talk about some of the campaigns that were then set up from. Yeah,
so I think the culture part is the most important there. So we compete with Investec every day, but I think the culture of Investec is similar to the culture of Amur or culture of Anchor, and that resonates well and suits me well. So kind of slid straight in, knowing the team and knowing that the culture of the business was suited to me. It's a tough start in wealth because, generally a big bank or insurance company will pay you a salary and you'll try work hard and get a bonus. Whereas wealth is different. You kind of feed off the book that you build, and you have to start somewhere. So, starting at zero is quite tough. I think most people start at zero maybe 7 or 8 years before I started, when they're a bit younger. But taking that plunge, I knew that I'm good at selling. I'm good at people interaction, and I've got a financial brain, so I can sell the product or understand the product, and that I'd be good. I think, and I think you have to have a little bit of arrogance to go into a role, start from scratch at the age of 35, and back yourself to kind of trade your way out of it. So, yeah, it was daunting, but super exciting. And so I couldn't wait to start.
So obviously our paths crossed with something that was started in Anchor Capital called the Wild Dogs. Do you want to talk about that, the origin of the name?
Yeah, so I don't know if I like the name because I think some people associate a wild dog with kind of tearing an impala apart. So we don't tear people apart. But I think, so Pete's a nature lover and he loves wild dogs. They're his favorite animal. So that's how the name came about, as Wild Dog Capital. And essentially, I think there was just a gap in the market where accounting firms accountants by trade are the trusted advisor for people in business. I think back to my dad. He would come home and he'd say, I've just had a catch up with our accountant and, he says I can buy a new car, And so those sorts of decisions are generally always bounced off the accountant. And we found that accountants were getting questions around, should I buy dollars or should I buy stocks or what should I do with my cash? Accountants are not wealth managers. They're not FACE compliant and they're not registered to provide that advice. So they'll say, go chat to Investec or Anchor and they'll help you. And we wanted to kind of build a business around focusing on that trusted relationship with accountants. And the good firms like Moore, they'll be very, very cautious with how they treat that trust that client has put in them. So, I think accountants have loads of wealth management businesses coming to them and saying, send us your clients. But it's about getting that trust that will look after your client.
I think that's been a key element for me, is that knowing the relationship that we have and being able to bring a client. I mean, you've never disappointed. And just the responsiveness to the client and wanting to make sure that we service them to the best of their ability, like that is something that you've done incredibly well for.
Thanks, yeah. And I think that's the culture of the business again. So a client of Moore wouldn't expect to get a response 3 weeks later to a query. So we have to be an extension of that. And thankfully, with our businesses, it works seamlessly because that's how we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as soon as a partner, an accountant, for example, feels like this may not be a safe set of hands, then they won't introduce their clients to us. So, but to get back to your question, so Wild Dog Capital was started in 2018. At that point, it was Matt, who was a founder of Anchor, and then also of Wild Dog Capital, and myself, two of us.
So you were the OG of.
I was the OG. I was the first one.
Yeah.
First one to join Matt. And now the business is about 55 people strong. We bring in significant assets. We've built a team of wealth managers that understand how to service clients, understand the products that we sell. And yeah, I think one of the keys to having someone invest their money with you is that it's the right solution for the client. I think our industry gets a bit of a bad name where people go and sell stuff that's highly fee generative for them. We don't do that. I heard an interesting quote where it says you can sell ice to an Eskimo, but you'll only sell it once. And so, you don't want to be this snake oil salesman that's going out and selling stuff. So we really do try and understand what the client wants, make sure that it's the right thing for them. And what we do resonates with clients. I mean, Anchor now as a whole manages over 270 billion rand. It's the biggest. It's the biggest of the independent wealth and investment providers in South Africa, and definitely the fastest growing. And I think that's because we provide solutions for clients. It's an easy thing to say as we provide solutions for clients. But if you really do that, then it does resonate with clients. And we get a huge amount of clients referring friends and family to us because what we provide to them is something we would give to our own family. And I often say that to clients. I say, if it was my money, this is what I would do. Or if I'm dealing with an elderly couple, I say, if it was my parents' money, this is what I would do.
Absolutely. And I've seen that even with you helping my dad in his retirement plan. So we can see the benefits of that.
Yeah, that was a nervous one. We had to get that one right.
No, exactly. So I wanted to talk, obviously you were there in 2018. The business was relatively small at the time and has grown incredibly well over the last couple of years. So how have you found that growth and then maintaining that culture? Like, how does Pete and Matt manage that? Obviously with Matt being in the UK now, who's been put in place to manage that shift in growth?
That's always the challenge, right? Is you start with a culture, and I have no doubt Mo has the same challenge that, you get big and then you have to keep the culture going. So our culture hasn't changed, and it's because Pete and Matt, to a less degree now having moved to the UK, but instills that in client, and Pete will still come to client meetings. So that keeps the culture of servicing the client alive, where Pete, got 500 people in his business now. If I phone him and say, I've got a client that needs to see you, he'll always make time for that. So I think the culture comes from the top, and the team have managed to keep it going, even with the growth.
Would you sum that culture up in a few words, all around responsiveness, relationships? What else do you guys talk through when you talk about culture within Anchor?
So it's funny. So culture is something that Anchor doesn't. We don't have sessions on culture. Culture, you can talk about something that is cultural to a business, and it will never be the culture of the business if you don't live it. So, but I think the culture of Anchor is we want to make clients money, and that's the purpose of investing. And you want to do it in a kind of an integral way with showing integrity to the client, that they know that they're not being swindled. I think our culture is one that clients understand what they have.
And you want a client for a long period of time and not something just for a short win.
Exactly. And clients with us know that we have their best intentions at heart. And from an internal cultural perspective, it's fun.
A lot of fun. We've been to many.
It's a lot of fun.
Party.
We open plan. Pete sits at a desk just like everybody else.
Does he get any work done when he's in an open plan office?
He sometimes has to hide away in a boardroom to get some mails out. But everyone's approachable at Anchor. If anybody shows signs of not being approachable or feeling like they're a bit too important for anybody else, that's very quickly dealt with. So our culture definitely comes from Pete and Matt, and is still very strong. In terms of how do we deal with Matt having gone overseas, so there are a couple of us that have kind of stepped up to look after the region. So I'm the co-leader of the Gauteng area. So Dave, Bethel, and myself, we look after Joburg and Pretoria, probably around 30 odd people, including wealth managers and assistants, etc. So we've had to step up, and again, same word, but it goes back to culture. That I would never want to be part of a business that isn't excellent, and for me to ensure that the business remains excellent, I have to try and do everything I can to keep it there. So it's just not in the culture of Anchor to say, well, Matt has gone overseas and we're going to just kind of see how things play out. We get stuck in.
Get involved, absolutely. Yeah. What do you love most about your job, besides doing podcasts?
Podcast number one. So what I love about my job is making a difference to people's investments. I mean, I think about a little old couple that I've been helping for many years now, and they had, they lost 600,000 or 700,000 rand. And that was it. And they are a perfect example of where some of the bigger corporates that are just kind of fee generative would have probably ripped them off a little bit. This little old couple, they're the ones that keep you up at night. It's not the 200 or 300, 400 million rand investments, it's the smaller couples. But where I get real joy there is we've done really well for them. We've had their investments in the right stuff, risk-adjusted stuff. With a couple like that, you can't just put it all into equity and hope it goes up. So we've been very cautious around what we've done. And, delivering them some cash when they need it is what kind of really drives me.
I think that's what we talk about, AI and how things will reshape the future. And for me, even within our business, and we've got some older tax clients, for argument's sake, and like having a cup of tea and having their favorite chocolate cake when
Can't
they come
replace
in
it.
and discuss their tax affairs. I mean, Lynn in our office is incredible with that.
Yeah.
And you can't lose that human touch.
Yeah.
And that, I think, just being able to have that empathy with an elderly couple to get them to that next phase of their journey is incredible.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the most important thing for me is the responsibility of looking after people's money. It's funny, we'll deal with, an entrepreneur who's driven a business for 30, 40 years. He's done everything he can to reduce costs and increase margins, and then he gets a lump sum. And then he hands that whole lump sum over to us. So it's a hell of a transfer and responsibility. Yeah. And I love that because firstly, the fact that that person is trusted in us to look after the investments. And secondly, we've got such a good team behind us that I know that we'll deliver what is hopefully right for that client. We don't always get it 100% right, but what we deliver generally will be right for that client. And that's kind of what drives me to keep going.
I think it's always important to know that having the relationship with you is that you are the expert, and being able to go to someone like you with a client who's just sold their business and has 200 million rand to invest, is that coming to you? I think it comes back down to that trust relationship again, and them trusting you to look after their money is key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we never take that for granted. That's vital for us. And the moment that you take that for granted or you misstep on that, that's the beginning of the end.
Absolutely.
So each client, no matter how big they are, a client's R1 million is as important as another client's 200 million rand. It's all relative for them. So we take it very seriously.
When investing, have you seen a shift in anything in particular this year or going forward for this year?
Yeah, so there is. There's a shift towards alternative investments at the moment. So there was some work done on big family offices out of the big banks in the US, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. And what they found was that the big family office investors have a far greater weighting towards alternative investments than you would expect. So you would expect a big family office to have 80 or 90% in equities, but they don't. They have an allocation to alternatives. And the reason for that is to kind of smooth out the ride of returns. So we put a huge amount of weight behind that in our business. So we've got kind of 4 or 5 funds that focus on alternative investments. Alternative investments being private equity, private debt, special opportunities, etc. And we scour the market for these. And it's nice for a client who might not have a ticket big enough to participate in a deal, but through our funds, they can do that. And we package it nicely. And then we put a whole bunch, many hours of work behind the scenes to make sure that investment is sound and right for our clients. So to answer your question, alternative investments is definitely a big change. Structured products is another big one. So, it's there are times when the market is not going to return 30 or 40%. We wish it was, but and over those times you need things to buffer your exposure. So alternative investments is definitely one. And then also our fixed income team locally in SA has grown significantly, run by Nolan. I think his assets under management are north of 25 billion rand now. And he's the underpin to most investments where you can take advantage of yield in South Africa. And it's been very successful. So I think it's not just put your money into shares. It's more of an asset allocation game where we have to make sure it's the right asset allocation per client. And that's on a client-by-client basis.
Are you seeing that clients are still moving a lot of money offshore?
Yes. The interesting thing is that the rand is actually steady at the moment. So It hasn't depreciated over the last 2.5 years. Obviously, it has spikes. But currently, if you had invested 100 Rand into dollars kind of 2.5 years ago, you haven't made money on the currency. You've made money on the investments because the offshore markets have been good. But yes, we always encourage clients to push money overseas. And I think the kind of what resonates most with me is, why should you only be able to buy ABSA or Nedbank or Standard Bank when you can buy JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, etc. So I think the mindset around South Africans, because of exchange control, is that you can only invest in South Africa unless you get all these special approvals, which is not actually the case. You can use asset swap. You can invest in funds that buy offshore stock. So we'll always push investments offshore, and a big portion of the investments that we manage is offshore. And the recent purchase that Anchor made of Credo in London gives us over 100 people on the ground in London. We've always had offshore kind of expertise and the ability to build funds offshore, but now even more so with Credo. So yeah, I think of all the investment houses, we probably one of the biggest advocates of pushing money offshore and getting exposure in hard currency.
I think one of the things that you're also really good is, and I always refer back to this relationship building. And, I want to talk about that. I think throughout your career, you can see that you are, where there's a deal to be made and you'll find it, but you're also a really good problem solver. So if there is a client who comes with a CGT event and you need to try and structure something that is tax efficient for them, you are always making a plan. And I think it's just, when I talk about relationships, it's the communication to the clients, it's that responsiveness that is key. So are there any examples that you can give me on that side of things?
Yeah, I think to differentiate yourself in the wealth game is we always say, give us the exam question, give us something to solve, and then we'll go and build something that works for you. So I think, that's a big kind of differentiator of Anchor, is we like to have solutions. And where we quite suited to that as at Anchor is, if you deal with a big bank or insurance company, you'll get their products and their solutions and their platforms. With us, we'll scour the market for the best opportunities at that time. As an example, we managed to get hold of an assessed loss that Hollard had, and we have clients that are investing tax-free. That's now used up, so it's on to the next thing. So with us, we'll never get stuck in kind of a routine of not having anything new. We'll always look for new stuff. And again, that comes from the guys that started the business, in that, there's always something out there that's better than potentially what you have. Always looking for new things. And that's generally around tax. As an example, we're working quite closely with Investec at the moment on a product that gives investors a 12% tax rate, as opposed to the traditional 45%. So there's lots, and it's always changing.
Coming, absolutely.
Yeah, and it depends on what we have at the time and the client profile.
I think what's important for me is having you in office with clients, and when we have client meetings, that we can just intro you to them and say, hey, this is Stephen, have the conversation. And that's obviously where relationships build and trust is formed, and then new work comes through the door. But as you've grown the team and as you become more and more successful, I want to just touch a little bit on the work-life balance, and if you even think that is a thing, and how do you manage that? Because obviously a wife, 2 young girls, that you saw to me that you would never own horses, but we can...
Yeah, that's another whole story.
Something my dad always said, never own something that eats while you sleep. So it's a costly thing. But how do you manage that?
So we work really hard, and if there's stuff to be done, it'll be done, whether it needs to be done on a Sunday. We'll do that, and there's many times when I've popped into the office on a Sunday just to print out proposals for the next day or make sure things are right. But the work-life balance at Anchor is good.
Work hard, play hard.
Yeah, just if you get it done, it's fine. Nicoline that works with me she's got a young daughter, and she'll message me and say, Emily's got a netball game, and can she go and watch the game at 3 o'clock?
And like you must go.
And it's must go, and on top of that, be present while you're there.
Yes.
So Anchor understands that. So if there's a family engagement, you need to be present. It's one thing just to be there. but it's another thing to not worry at that moment around anything other than the family engagement. So Anchor's got a very good work-life balance. Often we'll be in the office and someone will say, let's go grab a quick lunch, and who's free. So I think it's good. But
don't let clients down.
Don't let clients down.
Yeah.
And if there's a big event happening, if there's a listing and we helping with it, and you need to work late to get that done, then you get that done. I've never asked anyone at Anchor for help after hours, and the response has been, it's after hours, I'll do it tomorrow. Everyone was always prepared to quickly give you the answer that you need. So I think it's positive in that you can always get a response. But again, if I ask someone for help after hours and they're at their kids' gala, then they'll be at the kids' gala.
Amazing.
So I think we've got that right.
And I think, it's quite difficult in a company 500 strong, where you would think that the culture would be just work at all costs, but it's important that you get that balance right.
Yeah, it's just that same old word of culture, if I think of Pete, if he knew that Nicolene missed her daughter's ballet class, he would be horrified.
Absolutely.
So as he would be horrified if the work wasn't done. So it's a balance.
Yeah, and I think he then builds trust in the team to just make sure that stuff gets done.
Yeah.
And then you can take the time off. And I think we have a similar culture on that end.
Yeah, I think when you've really gotten that right and Mo will be the same, is where teammates will call that out. So, you don't want to have someone running a team calling people out and start micromanaging. That's not what we do. But if someone's not doing their stuff correctly and clients are being let down, the team will weed that out. And that's really when the culture's working.
So I did talk about AI and the impact on what you guys do. Do you see that coming through already? What does that impact look like? Do you think you can get proposals out quicker? It's there and it's incredible to use. So use it to your advantage.
So it's a very good example of where Anchor is really on the front foot in a lot of these things. So we've already started a little AI division run by someone called Ewout Fourie, who's very clued up. He actually has his own business in the AI space. Okay. And he's joined Anchor on a part-time basis to build out these tools. So we'll be first, hopefully, to market with these things. But you can use AI to make your reporting, as an example, a lot more bespoke. If a client is not interested in SA stocks, then don't send them reams and reams of information on SA stocks. Use an AI tool that understands that the client doesn't like SA stocks and send them stuff on global banks, as an example. So,
what the thing is, you still have to read the report to make sure that it's fit for purpose for your clients.
Yeah, you have to have the input.
We have all these AI, applications that help us. So it's hugely beneficial, but you still need to do your job to be able to go and sell that report or the project to your clients.
100%. And I think more so in the high net worth space where we generally play, we don't only deal with high net worth clients, but high net worth clients generally like to deal with us. That person wants to phone me, whether it's 7 p.m. or whatever time it is, and talk through his portfolio or her portfolio because there's been a change.
Yeah.
And I think AI will struggle to plug that gap of just being able to phone in. And we at Anchor, when we're most active when things are bad. So, when Trump tariffs are coming out and markets are tanking, most people in our space will bury their head in the sand and just hope that it goes away. They don't want to have those conversations. We get on the phones and we start getting in front of our clients at that point because they want to know that their hard-earned money is being looked after through the crisis. So that's where we differentiate ourselves. So I don't see AI doing, maybe at some point, but at the moment, it's really down to the relationship owner, the wealth manager, to run that. And so I don't see AI taking that over anytime soon. Maybe in the tax-free savings account space where people don't actually need the engagement as much. But high net worth clients, certainly not.
They want a little bit more of the human touch.
Yeah.
So tell me, Steve, any goals that you've set for yourself this year, personally, professionally? What do those look like? You're doing a 21K running Comrates next year. What does that look like?
So I'm not doing the comrades next year. No, so I think every year I set myself goals of new assets under management. And I have goals of how big the assets that I look after need to be. They all go up in kind of factors of $1 billion. So I'd like to get to kind of managing about 5 billion rand is my next goal.
We have a target for us to manage money under that. And remember, I got those golf balls, and we said that when we get to that number, we'll hit those golf balls.
So we need to hit the golf balls.
So we need to manage that. Okay,
yeah.
Absolutely.
We need to do that. So always set goals of new client money. I think that's how we build our business is new client flows. That's number one. And number two is keeping clients happy. It's one thing to, prop investments, fill the bucket at the top, but if it's leaking at the bottom, you're kind of chasing your tail. So
what does that mean, keeping a client happy for you?
So that's a good question. So we can't control the markets.
Yeah.
I can't control what Trump does around tariffs. But what I can control is client engagement, making sure that they know what's going on in their portfolio, making sure that they're aware of the risks associated with what's going on. So it's funnily enough, a lot of admin that keeps clients happy. So Nicoline, who works with me, is unbelievable. And I know that that's always kind of sorted out. So clients always get a good experience from an admin perspective. And then I need to keep clients happy by engaging with them and just letting them know that the investments are important to us and they're not just kind of being forgotten about while the markets are tanking when Trump is starting with tariffs. So
absolutely. So those are professional goals. Personal goals?
Personal goals. I think my goals remain steady in that space, and that's being present with my family as much as I can.
Yeah.
So time with my 2 daughters is always number one outside of work, and my wife and Jules. And I think it's just spending quality time with them. So we like to travel together. We go up to the bush a lot.
Yeah.
So I think family goals are important. And then I suppose it's always important to keep, being in the game that I'm in. I love, as you say, love relationships. Keeping my friendship group strong. It's difficult when people are immigrating. Joburg is not the most desirable place at the moment. So keeping those relationships strong, because you can see people kind of moving off.
Absolutely. Cool. So I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to necessarily touch on, but I think we have spoken a lot, and I really do appreciate your time today. So
it's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for coming in and having a discussion. I think there's so many similarities around our 2 businesses, around the relationships that are formed, the culture of the business, and I think that's how we work so well together. But I look forward to hitting those golf balls off of the deck in Bryanston.
Yes, we're renovating, so we can.
So just make sure that
there's a little spot
for us. But yeah, thank you very much. So guys, please, if you've enjoyed the conversation today, please go and like and subscribe to the Mo Johannesburg YouTube channel. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Kat.